asked me, how do you become a storyteller? Or does everyone have stories to tell? I said, well, yes, everyone has stories to tell, and if they really want to tell them, they can become a storyteller. All you need is a heart beating for stories and a strong belief that stories and storytelling can change the way you shape the world. And for everything else, I am there. My name is Rituparna Ghosh. I'm a storyteller, trainer, consultant, and coach, and I share tips, tricks, techniques, secrets from my story bag, helping you tell better stories in your work, in your business, and your life. On ABC of Storytelling 2.0, we are on the letter S. So let's dive right in to the sea of stories and storytelling. S for structure. If someone asked me, Rituparna, what is that one tip that everyone should know about storytelling? I said, perfect your grip on the structure of the story. Every story has a beginning, middle, and end. And how you navigate from the beginning to the middle and from the middle to the end is all that defines you as a storyteller, all that defines your story, the one that you're using for a purpose. Understanding the beginning, middle, and end, or the structure of a story is so important because, number one, it helps you navigate how long will your story be, how long will it take for you to tell the story from the beginning to the end. You can tell a story in 5 minutes, in 5 seconds, in 50 minutes, or even in 2 hours if you are telling it in a film. But if you know how long is your structure, how long will you take from the beginning to the middle to the end, that's important. So the length and the duration. Number two, it helps you identify the elements that you're going to put into your story. If your story is a 3-minute tale, you don't expect to tell a lot of things that you would put in if you were to tell it in 3 hours, right? So a 3-minute story versus a 30-minute story or a 3-hour story, the number of elements get in more. Number three, how much time do you have with your listener? Are you going to give an elevator pitch? Then you have only perhaps 30 seconds to tell your story. Are you there for an interview? An interview where you know you have only about 30 minutes with your interviewer. Are you going to tell one story in those 30 minutes? Or you know that you're working with a team and you know you have your team's attention for 2 hours. Well, I'm not recommending you tell one story in 2 hours, but you know that you can pepper it up with many stories of varied lengths to get to them to communicate what you really want to communicate. Understanding the beginning, middle, and end, or understanding the structure is so vital because it helps you understand how will your listener connect with you, how long will he or she have the patience to listen to your story. So a story is defined by its structure, but your structure is also defined by the story you tell. Sometimes your structure may be a longer one, sometimes your structure may be a shorter one, depending on the purpose with which you're telling it and the format in which you are telling it. Let's suppose you are going for an interview and your interviewer is asking you, tell me about yourself. Now here is a perfect moment to tell a story, but you don't want to tell a story for the entire duration of your of the interview. So if somebody was to ask me that, tell me about yourself, then I define myself as someone who grew up in a small town, came to the big city to make a life, to make a living and a legacy. But in the past 22 years, I've realized that I am still a small town girl. Now this is where is by beginning, because by now I've established a little about myself. I've told my listener who I am, where do I come from. So your origin story could be something that you could begin your story with. Cut to, what do I do today for a living? That's where my middle is. And I can take somebody right into a classroom about an anecdote, what I had done within a classroom or while I'm talking to someone. Now you see, I'm also using the beginning, middle, and end to talk about, contextualized about who I am and what I do. So I'm not really perhaps telling one story, but I am telling my story, and I'm shifting different scenes, I'm shifting different timelines, and then itself I can take the listener into my story to tell them a little more about me. Understanding the beginning, middle, and end of a story is so very vital. In the beginning, introduce your characters, introduce the place, the setting, the time in which it started. Imagine you're telling the story of how your organization started. If it's an organization which started 50 years back, has been in business for the past 100 years, so 100 years back, what was the world like? So your beginning should cover that. The middle is where all the activities happen, all the action happen, all the challenges happen. Now you can't put everything into your story. Your story could be about that one challenge that there was, or one problem that needed to be solved, or a problem that you were a part of in finding the solution. So bring that. The story could be about that. That's where the middle is. The end is about the resolution of how everything was solved and how it came in. A resolution also, the end also puts that story into context about why are you telling it to everyone? Why is it important? Why is this story important? And what were you trying to achieve with this story? That's where the end is, because it comes with a little punchline, with a bit of contextualization of why you told this particular story. As for sources, I began my storytelling journey in television, in journalism. And back then, a source was a person who brought you that story. Well, we were taught to have different kinds of sources which would lead you to different stories, where they come from, who are the people, what are their lives like, and why that story needs to be told. But today, if you are a storyteller in business, in an organization, if you are a storyteller who is using stories to communicate with your target audience, no matter where they are, your sources are more diverse. Your sources could be real people you have engaged with, your clients, your vendors, people who have experienced what you have to, what you represent as an entrepreneur, as a leader, people who have influenced you in your life, people who have told you or shared valuable lessons from their life, shaping you and your story and your perspective in the world. Your sources could also include books that you have read, interesting literature that have shaped the way you go about your work, in your business, in your profession, in your life. It could be valuable lessons which you have lived, which could be about story. Sources could also be television, could be videos, could be social media. Sources could also be the internet. You could bring in sources from all places. A lot of people think that storytelling is all about real events, personal events, or stories which are in fiction. But non-fiction is the kind of stories which we largely miss. There's a lot of events happening in the world, and a lot of events, when brought in to a business environment, into a classroom, into engaging learning and development environment, can open up a lot of discussions about what people think, how they feel, how they respond, what are their beliefs, what are their values. Stories therefore unfold a lot of debate and discussion and discovery, and that's where your sources, or keeping a multiple varied sources from where you would pick your stories from, is a good habit. Read as much as you can, watch as much as you can. For all you know, even an OTT or a Netflix film could be an excellent source story that you can pick and use in your session. I've done that. I've used films because a lot of people don't read. So I pick up films and I use them as discussions about how people see problems, how people see characters, how people understand motivation, how people understand change, how people reflect on change, and how do they manage it. All of this has been done through stories which I have not written, which I have not told, but I have picked up from the world outside, from media outside, and I've used them to create discussions and dialogue in a team. So pick your sources well, have diverse sources, understand how will you contextualize it for your audience, because that's what is very important, and keep exploring the world of stories, because there's a story out there everywhere. One point about using personal stories: well, if they are not your own, if they are shared stories, for example, an interaction with a colleague, with a friend, with your sibling, with your partner, with your child, with somebody who you think that story can be useful in a certain environment, always take permission, because it's important that when a private story becomes a public story, when it is shared openly, the other person in that story should also be known, or should also be aware that that story is being shared, because we all have interactions with people one on one. Sometimes even your child on the way to school, if you're about to drop your child, may share something about himself or herself, and you may feel that, wow, that's a wonderful perspective, and you want to drive to your workspace and share it with your team. But remember, your child shared it in complete confidence, knowing well that this was only meant for the parent. But if you were to do the same with a customer, with a client, always take permission. Tell them that I love this story. Can I go ahead and share it in my work? There are chances that they will say yes. All right, so go ahead and enjoy your sources. Go ahead and find interesting sources and go and sort your story back, one story at a time. As for strategy, one of the first things that I have said in ABC or anywhere else that I keep talking about storytelling is that storytelling is an ongoing process. You can't begin it one day and say, we've had enough of it, or we've told enough stories and we don't need to tell stories. Well, stories or storytelling, using it within an organization, within your sphere of work, is something like growing a plant. You need to grow that plant bit by bit, water it every day, nurture it every day for you to enjoy the fruit or the fragrance that it will give on the end, or how it will live with you for the rest of your life, right? So storytelling is pretty much like that. You have to nurture it. You have to nurture the skill. You have to nurture what returns does stories and storytelling yield you. I've been asked this several times, is there a return on investment of storytelling? And I say, yes, there is. You can measure it, but you have to create a strategy. You have to sustain storytelling. So strategy of how will you tell stories, how many stories will you tell, what will those stories communicate, and how long will you be telling those stories, how long and what kind of stories are you telling to your audience, and what are the stories that they are telling back to you. Are you creating a culture of storytelling within your organization, within your leadership, within your business? If you are using stories, it will yield a result. It will give you a return of your investment, but you need to have a strategy. You need to identify how many stories will you tell, who will you tell it for, how often will you tell those stories, what are the various purposes that you will have, what is your expectation and objective of telling those stories. Are you trying to manipulate them? Are you trying to inform them? Are you trying to educate? Are you trying to create a dialogue and a discussion? Are you trying to create stories to create authenticity and honesty and transparency about you, your brand, about who you are? Then these stories need to continue. It's important. Strategy, for sometimes people tell me that strategy is a bad word. Strategy means that you're actually plotting and planning and scheming to make a thing work, to make it profitable. Well, storytelling is not about making anything profitable. Well, yes, you can use stories for profit. You can, if you are using it to build your brand, you can create a memorable brand by telling stories one at a time. But even then, the plan, the roadmap, the path that you will take is defined by a strategy. At Your Story Bag, we are a storytelling, training, consulting, and coaching company, and the part of our work that we enjoy the most is the strategy. Well, we can tell stories for you, we can train you to tell stories, we can design story-based interventions for you. We can also work with you as a coach, a one-on-one coach, helping you find that perfect story to tell your audience. But the best thing that really keeps us on our toes and thinking and dreaming about stories and what they can do for you is when we help our clients create a strategy. When we help them to find that storied voice which will define the work that they are doing, how they can sustain it, how they can develop it, how they can grow it, and how they can nurture a culture of storytelling within an organization. That is what's the most exciting part of our work as storytellers. If you'd like to know how to create a strategy, a business strategy, a sales strategy, a marketing strategy, a leadership strategy, or a strategy of just using stories so that it creates an authentic brand, whether it's a personal or a business one, how can you create a storytelling strategy? And there is, yes, it's very, 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 very important to create a storytelling strategy today. How can you do that? You can get in touch with us, write to me, and we will be very happy to help you create a strategy for you, for your business, and for your work. That's all I have time for this week on ABC of Storytelling 2.0. I hope these tips and tricks and techniques and secrets are really stimulating you as far as stories and storytelling are concerned. That's my objective, to help you tell better stories. You can get in touch with me if you have a question, if you have a doubt, if you'd like to share your story with me, because we are more eager listeners than we are storytellers. I'd love to listen to your stories. If you have applied any of our tips in your work, in your stories, please share them with us. We